Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. Brand new Ford Bronco Raptor. It is without a doubt the most hardcore off-roading vehicle you can buy from the factory today. I've gotten it good and dirty, so I can tell you it does things that will blow your mind. But equally as important, how does it drive in town? Climb aboard, let's find out. But for now, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Now, you fire up the Bronco Raptor, and you immediately know something a little special is going on from the exhaust note. It's a 418 horsepower, 440 pound-feet of torque from a turbocharged 3.0 liter EcoBoost engine. It's basically like a smaller version of what's in the F-150 Raptor. But in a lot of ways, the Bronco is basically an F-150 Raptor, almost more than it's a Bronco. All the upgrades are intended to turn this into the most hardcore factory off-roader you can buy, and they do a really good job. You've got 37-inch BF Goodrich all-terrain tires, which are the largest tires ever fitted to an SUV from the factory. They're an option on the F-150 Raptor, but standard on the Bronco Raptor. And they're 12.5 inches wide, which means at lower speeds, you definitely hear a little bit of tire noise, and that's something that you just have to live with. At the very least, Ford did use all-terrains instead of mud terrains, and that's sort of a concession to the fact that most people who are going to shell out for a Bronco Raptor are going to spend most of their time driving it in town or on the freeway. Off-road driving only makes up a small percentage of the time that you're driving a truck that is this hardcore, even though you're spending, that brings up a whole nother conversation, 100 grand on an off-roading SUV. Now this exact Bronco has a sticker right at 80 grand. That's pretty expensive. It's even more hilarious that the Bronco Raptor costs just as much as an F-150 Raptor and only weighs 9 pounds less. So it's down on power a little bit, but the shorter wheelbase makes it actually feel a little bit more responsive, off-road and on. Of course, here we are, I'm looking at a Prius, and I'm looking down at the Prius. Not just because I'm looking down at a Prius, but I'm physically looking down at a Prius because we're really high up off the ground. I drove a base Big Bend Bronco, say that 10 times fast, the other day, just for comparison. It's a little bit lower, actually surprisingly not that much lower, but on street tires, really no big turbo power, same 10-speed automatic, which surprised me and made it much more powerful than expected because you've got good gear ratios down low. And then you can push it a little bit. It's nothing compared to what you get with a Bronco Raptor though. This thing is a torque monster. Off-road, that's actually something of a problem because it can spin the tires in dirt really easily. On the road, the 10-speed automatic and all that power makes a huge difference. And you can use paddle shifters, which the lower spec Broncos don't have, to keep it in gear when you're off-roading, which is important to prevent that wheel slip and to prevent the transmission from shifting all the time. In town, when you're feeling a little sporty, you can use the GOAT mode settings here, flip over to Sport, firms up the Fox 3.1 live valve shocks, changes the throttle response, and also makes it very fun to drive. I was blown away when they first gave us the Bronco Raptors at Ford's press drive event out in Palm Springs and Johnson Valley. You can see I'm just flowing through traffic here, no problem. Very impressive. I'm in sport mode, so the throttle is staying pretty high and it's not shifting on me. Luckily I've got paddle shifters. But the first day in Palm Springs, they gave us a Bronco Raptor and said, drive up to Idlewild. Take that Palms to Pines highway, which is an awesome road. And this thing handles like a sports car when you firm up those Fox shocks. I was so stunned at how well it handled with minimal body roll that I literally stopped and pulled over to make sure that Ford hadn't snuck a rear sway bar on. Of course, this has a disconnecting sway bar for when you go off-roading, but it doesn't have a rear sway bar. And I checked, and it still doesn't have a rear sway bar. And yet, here we go, coming into a nice right-hander there, just no body roll. You did hear a little bit of tire squealing though, and that's to be expected from 37s when you're cornering. And when you take it up in the canyons and drive this thing exactly how it's not supposed to be driven, even though you're having fun, you do hear a lot of complaining from the tires. But really, driving around town, you're probably going to keep it in normal mode, which softens everything up, keeps it in sort of a more eco-friendly throttle and transmission shift point setting, and keeps the suspension nice and soft. Driving around town, it's surprisingly negotiable. I've taken it to the grocery store and parked in a tight parking lot. Yeah, you gotta worry about how wide those big fender flares are. This thing is a foot wider than a base Bronco, but it's actually kind of nice because you've got the nice classic style lines here that go down the edge of the hood where it meets the fender, and it's sort of like a flag, so you know where exactly the sides of the truck are. Then you have to keep track of like 6 inches worth of fender flare on each side, in addition to the additional body flare of the Bronco Raptor. And it takes a little getting used to, but luckily it's got 360 cameras and all of that. And then speed bumps, didn't even feel it. We're in normal mode. We're not even in Baja mode, which plays with the shock tuning even more, but you just don't even feel it. It's hilarious, blasting over speed bumps at top speed. For example, we'll do that right now. Here comes a speed bump. It's hilarious. They've done such a good job building this truck to do exactly what you want to do, because when you're off-roading, it's just a joke. It is almost too good at off-roading. Being honest, it's just, I've gone up stuff that I never thought it could do. We had to leave my friend behind 2 days ago on the first obstacle. He tried to go up it 3 or 4 times, center differential locked, low range, messing with his Torsen differential, but he couldn't make it up. He couldn't even get a little bit of the way up. I went up in the Bronco Raptor, just in 4 high, didn't even choose a line, just straight up it. It's crazy. It just does the stuff. And then you come into town, and yeah, you're gonna get like 13 mpgs, maybe 11 I think I'm averaging on all the gauges here. But man, if it doesn't drive well. Super impressive what Ford has done. And you gotta compare it to the competition. This thing was built to demolish the Jeep Wrangler, and to an extent the Gladiator, which is a lot smaller than an F-150. And it does the job very well, even though it has independent front suspension, which was everyone's big complaint. Oh, it's not gonna have the articulation of a Wrangler Rubicon. Guess again. I've driven a Gladiator Rubicon with a factory 2-inch lift and admittedly 33-inch tires, and that thing is super impressive and actually drives on-road pretty well because it has a little bit longer of a wheelbase than the Wrangler. But this Bronco Raptor is on a whole different level. I love the 8-speed automatic that Jeep uses. The 10-speed here, arguably better in town and on the highway. Off-road, I have my problems with it because it wants to shift probably too often and actually causes wheel slip and a little bit of weight lurching. But you use the paddle shifters, and Ford put paddle shifters on the steering wheel. How nice. I love that it's got like a racing stripe on the steering wheel, just in case you were gonna take it out for any track time. And then it's got all the connectivity you want. You've got Apple CarPlay, I can play my music, and I can flip over and use Onyx off-road, which I love doing. Kind of hilarious to use Onyx off-road when I'm on-road, but you know, at least I can listen to Elvis, which is for some reason the music I always want to listen to when I'm off-roading. Now, as awesome as this thing is, there are some criticisms. The exhaust is a little loud. Luckily, you can tone that down with buttons on the steering wheel. You can select normal, sport, Baja, which is really loud, or quiet to really be kind to your neighbors. But you're gonna get terrible fuel economy. And of course, there's the pricing. Yeah, this thing's MSRP is 80, but people are saying you can't get them for under 100. I don't even think, as far as I know, that Ford is building Bronco Raptors yet. I'd imagine this will go to the crusher after it's done making the media rounds. I think it's like a pre-production version. Although the build quality seems really good, not a lot of rattling like I just had in a Ford Maverick. Other little things that kind of bug me, the visibility isn't great. Luckily, you've got backup cameras galore, 3D cameras that you can use off-road and on-road. They put that big 37-inch tire back there, but that meant that they had to move the brake light up, and it's kind of hard to see out the back at all. And then, of course, because this is such a much larger vehicle than a base Bronco, it's kind of lame that the interior is still so small. The back seats are tiny, the trunk is really tiny, even though the body is now wider, and then you've got the fender flares on top of that. It's just unfortunate. Maybe you get the hard top, maybe you try and figure out some way to put a roof tent on this. I don't know. And in fact, this removable hardtop is a little bit louder in terms of wind noise than the one that I had on the original press tour. I don't know if that's because this truck has 3,000 miles on it and it's just starting to loosen up a little bit, or if that's because they gave us really tight ones for the press trip to get some good reviews. But getting up to 60, 70, 80 in this thing, and you definitely notice some wind noise. Tire noise is something that you have to live with 37-inch, 12.5-inch wide tires. If you put 35s on, it would just be silly. And honestly, I'd probably buy this and put 40s on it. Of course, I'm never gonna buy this because it's so expensive. You're gonna be paying $130,000 for what is, in the end, an off-road vehicle. It's pretty nice on the inside. It's not quite up to the luxury level of the F-150 Raptor, which is interesting because this is really gonna start competing with the G-Wagen at those prices. Is this gonna be a luxury vehicle that people in West LA are gonna be buying as a status symbol? I think it is. You talk about a mall crawler, this thing's going to Whole Foods. Yeah, your greeny weeny eco-conscious friends are gonna hate you, but they're gonna hate you in a G-Wagen anyway. So, would you rather have the Bronco? I've heard that G-Wagons drive like absolute trash on road. I really want to take one off-roading, and the Bronco drives pretty well on road, which is basically where I'm at. Blown away. It's like my brain just can't quite comprehend how a truck that weighs 5,700 pounds, that's only 9 less than an F-150, because they put basically all of the F-150's suspension, steering, and drivetrain components in here to support the big power upgrades, and then you've got bigger tires. So, how does it drive so well? Ooh, luckily we've got blind spot monitoring because the blind spots are terrible, and I didn't see that Kia Soul because it's literally lower than the window height. It's hilarious. I just drove an Apocalypse 6x6 and I was like looking down at full-size trucks, and that's sort of what it's like in this thing, though not quite as radical because that was on 40s. People are gonna buy this and put 40s on it. It's got the room in the wheel wells. That's what I would do. Why not go whole hog? If you're gonna take this thing off-roading, you're gonna have a blast on 37s. On 40s, you got even more ground clearance. You've got even more grip. But if you're gonna be putting bigger tires on anything, why not get a lower spec Bronco that's gonna cost half as much? It's still got a good amount of power because of that 10-speed automatic, and you're gonna really not find that much of a difference unless you're in the most hardcore off-roading possible. The press trip for this was at Johnson Valley, King of the Hammers, and it was the gnarliest rock crawling I've ever seen. I couldn't believe Ford's lawyers signed off on letting a bunch of amateur journalists do what we did. They didn't even bring a bunch of spare ball joints. They just said it can do it. You'll be fine. Now we banged the skid plates, and we ground up the rock sliders, which are cool because you can remove the step and just have true rock sliders from the factory, and it just did it. We jumped them. I jumped it a bunch of times, not always on purpose, at like 100 miles an hour in the dirt. But then here on the highway, as we're getting onto the freeway here, plenty of power. Overtaking power is no problem. 10 speeds shifting up, 7, 8, 9. It shifts really smoothly, but I don't know if it'll show up on the GoPro. You can definitely hear some wind noise, some tire noise, and when you're going this fast on the highway, you're getting very, very bad fuel economy. Will they ever put a V8 in the Bronco Raptor? They're putting a supercharged V8 in the F-150 Raptor to make it the Raptor R, which will then be the most hardcore off-roading vehicle you can possibly buy. But it would be really cool if they put a V8 in the Bronco. And we know it'll fit because the Bronco DR Desert Racer has a V8. So it'll fit in the engine bay. I don't know if they can do it because they just have to worry about the fuel economy of their entire model lineup. It's gonna be bad. This thing gets bad enough fuel economy, and I think the reason they put the 3.0 in instead of the 3.5 liter that the F-150 uses is to try and keep the whole fleet's averages just that incremental amount higher. Of course, they also want the F-150 to sit at a higher little level than the Bronco Raptor, but with the pricing, it's really like the Bronco is the more hardcore vehicle. And it can do high-speed stuff, which is actually great because it doesn't have the tail-happy nature of the F-150, which has less weight over the rear axles, despite the longer wheelbase. And it can do rock crawling because of the shorter wheelbase. It's sort of the do both. They say that they designed it inspired by Ultra 4 racers, and from what we did in Johnson Valley, that is 100% the truth. Again, the off-roading will not let you down. It's so good it almost gets rid of what the off-roaders call the pucker factor. I was doing stuff 2 days ago that my Montero or my Cayenne would have really struggled with. I would have been having to choose the most judicious line and probably been like fully locked. This thing, you don't even have to pay attention. You just go straight up. I kept saying I'm using the YouTuber line, trying to get a little bit off camber, and it just, nothing. You've got all of the modern tech you would expect, and then you've got all these off-road buttons, which I really like. I wish there was a better way of controlling stuff here, here, and here, because the computer will often be like, you can't put it in 4 low because you're in drive. You have to put it in neutral, but then when you put it in neutral and your seatbelt's off, then the seatbelt warning comes up. And I was off-roading and it kept saying that there was someone in the passenger seat in the back and I didn't have the seatbelt buckled, so it was dinging at me and blah, blah, blah. There's something that's a little bit heavy on the digital side, but then again, this is a truck that can just do everything. But the impressive thing with the Bronco Raptor is that you don't have to really think about driving it in town. Anyone can get in this thing and cruise. It's not a problem. You're not worried about like fitting a big truck into tight spaces. It's just livable, even though you don't have quite as much storage as I would like. And we all knew it was going to be great off-road. It was better than I expected off-road, but the real revelation, and I think the impressive thing that Ford's engineers did best, was to make something that's so good off-road, also so easy to drive on-road. Yeah, it's a big truck. Yeah, it gets pretty bad fuel economy, but it's a lot of fun, and it's not miserable, like some Jeep Wranglers that are just basically tippy as hell on the freeway. This thing cruises at 80, no problem. I hope you learned something watching this about the Ford Bronco Raptor. Everyone's gonna do their off-roading reviews, but I figured it's important to know how it drives on-road if you're really thinking about committing all that money to buying one of these very rare builds. Thanks for watching, and as always, before you sign off, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can beat the algorithm. Thanks.